let us know, and then we won't circulate it, or just cut it off right away. Then would be great if you could also ask questions during the session if you have questions, of course. We have a raise hand function for that. That's under the participants tab, because we're so many people, that would be great. That would be questions that are useful to everybody. I can't think of any questions that aren't useful, but yeah, in general, that would take some time to discuss plenarily. Then, of course, we have the chat, and there you can ask all sorts of questions, because there we can just continue with the presentations and answer the chat questions maybe at the same time. You could do that to the group, but you could also do it to individuals and also to us in particular. And then if there are detailed questions, especially during the hands-on work, I think, then we can also open a breakout room. And then we can sort of look at your screen, for instance, or we can show our screen and then maybe help with some specific questions. Yeah, this is us from PBL, but maybe it's good at this point, I think, to do a very, very short round just to mention your name. And I thought it would be nice to use the wiki already for that, to not forget any model teams. For instance, why am I not seeing this now? I'm not logged in. Okay, I'm logging in. Yeah, that doesn't help. This is something we'll all discuss later, of course, but I thought it would be nice to have a list of all the models and then go through it. And then if somebody of this model is there, then he or she can mention her name, or names, of course. So let's start at the top. AIM-CGE, I don't know if anybody's there from the overarching AIM-CGE model. Maybe not, actually. I haven't seen it yet, but I'll contact Shinichiro. Oh, is there? AIM-CGE Korea, then? Just say, hi, I'm blah, 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 if you're there. But, okay. Should be somebody, I think. AIM End Use India.
Yeah, hi, my name is Sarita, and I manage the AIM End Use India model.
Great, welcome. AIM Hub, that's actually AIM-CGE, so the name has changed, so probably not. Blues and Coffee Tea.
Hi. Hello, this is Evelyn. Yes, we are around 5 people from Mothers, Blues, Coffee and Tea.
Great, and you're super early now, probably.
Yeah, 7 a.m.
Sorry for that. Sorry for that. DNE 221 plus. Haven't seen anybody in the list, but maybe. E3ME FTT. EPA. Hi, who's that?
I'm managing the E3ME FTT model.
Perfect, great to hear.
Well, this is Sergey Paltsov from EPA, presenting EPA model.
Good to hear. GCAM? Maybe not. Then JB3?
This is Kostas from E3 Modeling from the GEM3.
Welcome.
Hi.
International Futures? Imaclim? Imaclim India?
Hi, I'm Deepthi from IIM Lucknow, and I manage the Imaclim India model.
Great. Image will introduce ourselves a little later. Then iPads. Markol India.
Hi, this is Swapnil. I manage the Markol India model.
Welcome. And Mrs. Globayam.
Hi, this is Albert Brouwer from IASA. I'm here more to put an ear to the ground. I manage the wiki and documentation surrounding Globiome and the efforts here at IASA. And so I'm just looking for ideas and listening in.
Perfect. Thanks. Pols?
Yes, Kimon here for the Pols model from Jersey. Also another colleague is online.
Perfect. Welcome. Prometheus. There's also Jimmy3. I think same team. Remind.
Silvia, I'm here for the Remind group, and I think Lavinia should also be here from the Remind group.
Perfect. Then TM UCL.
Hi, Ilka is here, and at least one other colleague, so Olivier.
Welcome. And last but not least, which?
Hi, it's Laurent here about the witch model from Siemens.
And also Giacomo. Hi, everybody.
Welcome. Hi. Great. Then we can get started with a short introduction, I think. Yeah, well, first maybe an introduction of ourselves. We're here with at least 3 people, and could be more, but these are the 3 that hope will help you hopefully here. Helene is the host, and she'll check the raise hands option. So if there are raised hands, we could just, I think during the session, already try to answer them, these questions, and also open breakout rooms if that's necessary. Oriana, she will look at the chat box and tries to answer questions there, I think, and also if these are a bit more complicated, we just bring them in a group or maybe appoint them to one of us. And she can also help with the breakouts. She knows quite a lot about how the wiki works. And Veronica knows everything about the wiki. Now she is the administrator and could help you with any questions you have with the wiki. And she also prepared a lot of work for this session, so that's awesome. Then let's get started. I'll just introduce, give a short introduction also why we're doing this. That is actually a copy almost of what we discussed during Engage, but hopefully you can bear with me. And I mean, for a lot of people, that should be new, so I'll do that quickly. It's also not too long. And it's also talking about what we're doing now and what we plan to do and what we could do, possible future developments. And that's something we already discussed a little bit in the last session. And then we'll, of course, give a tour of the wiki and then hopefully show you what you could do afterwards. And we'll focus, of course, on the reference cards. That's the overview page of every model. But if you want to work on your model documentation page, then you're welcome to do so. I think I should make this smaller, otherwise you can't see it. Oh, yep. That's you're very welcome to work on your model documentation pages, and we'll introduce that a little bit. But already would be great if we could finish the reference cards for all the new models. Are there any questions at this point? Because if not, then I'll continue. Sorry. So what have we been doing? On the content side, we are currently working on further improving, in general, the centralized, harmonized model documentation, what the EMC wiki is, and that's expanding the content, just having more relevant pages, also increasing the model coverage. I think this is a great step towards that, and also improve the submission and review process. And the first step now, obviously, are the reference cards. What we've done is to align those with the ARC registration forms, and those are kind of forms that you would hand in for any new project. Those are actually quite standard, but they contain actually all the main information that you want of a model. And yeah, this year we try to update the reference cards such that we they contain exactly the same information as these forms. Yeah, and also a few other things that have been improved is the text editor is now way easier than it was a year ago. And also, for instance, a data export function, which has also been used for AR6. But of course, we want to work also on the documentation pages. One thing we're working on right now is to have a pool of experts to evaluate the current structure of the model documentation pages, and also ask them, of course, where we can improve. These could also be the kind of people that review the pages of the different models, but this is purely thinking about what the kind of information you want in there. And for instance, on land modeling, we know that we want to change a few pages there and expand them a bit more. We would also like to bring in other sources, so from other projects, for instance, where there are more detailed questionnaires, for instance, and also appendixes from different reports where you could find more information. Yeah, it would be great if we could integrate that, or the information that's in there. Then on the procedure side, the goal is eventually to become a journal, and there have been several parties that have shown interest, so I think that's quite doable. And then the idea is that all the documentation on the wiki that is published, so it can be on there but not yet published, but if it is, then it's also referenceable and it has a DOI. And yeah, for this we work together with the IMC, but also in different projects where just model documentation is a task. And there we would really like to have editors and reviewers in place who do this on a regular basis. If a new model comes in, that they really sort of coordinate the review process. Yeah, and there's an IMC documentation group, but there are quite a few extra people working on it. But now, at least it's also Detlef, Volker, Daniel, Stephanie, Maarten, and Rieneke. But yeah, we'll have to see how that. I mean, it could be any group. If we want to make it formal, then it might be a bit different. But this is, in any case, the group that's working on it now. Then the procedure, in short, is just what you would do with a normal paper. So your model documentation has been submitted, then an editor is assigned, and he or she finds reviewers. And yeah, we also want to work on documentation that's a sort of template that says what we want to have in the model documentation, what kind of standards we have, what it should include in detail, those kind of things. Yeah, and based on that, there could be review comments, of course, and those are sent back to the model team. There's a revision and a resubmission, and finally publication. Yeah, and there we have thought a lot about possible improvements. It's still something that would be a bit further in the future, but yeah, we have some discussion about changing the software. That would be completely different, but there are some merits in that. Like read the docs is in combination with GitHub. The advantage would be to have version control, to have automated updates from the native model pages. But yeah, then you might lose something of the model comparison functions or the ease of use at the wiki. So ideally, we want to have a combination of all these characteristics. Yeah, you could also think of adding model data, for instance, or diagnostics of the models, standard scenarios, results of that on the wiki. You could change the design. I could click on this link. I did that in the last presentation, but in principle, this is a sort of competing website where there are also a few integrated assessment models, but they really focus on design. So you have icons and those kind of things. You could do that later if you want. And for instance, also filter and search functions. We do have those, but yeah, we have a few ideas of how to improve those kind of things. This is a survey that we did last presentation, very shortly and also with a very small group, but gives a nice idea. The idea, what it shows actually is that everything is important. Maybe people don't fully all believe in the data or code should be shared on the wiki. But I think all the other things, version control, comparability of models, completeness, and so on, all these things that I just mentioned are relevant. I think we could work on that or add it to the wiki. Short timeline, yeah, this is of course also more relevant in projects, but just to give you an idea, we actually all the things that are on there in the description of works of these projects, yeah, I think we can take those off because it's in principle having a documentation team, maybe changing the structure or changing the structure in any case a bit of the wiki, and maybe also the software, but we're not obliged to do so. But in any case, also add more models and coverage. So I think we're doing that. And obviously, and that's maybe more important, we want to think about continuously updating and also having those reviews in place. So it's quite important that the team that we do have installed at some points really keeps working on this. And I think that's also quite doable, but we have to make sure that that's the case. All right, then now we're moving already a bit towards the workshop, I think. This is an overview that I haven't fully updated yet, but I added a few things. In any case, what we can always do is check what the coverage of individual models is on the wiki. And there are mandatory pages, 29 in total. And in the first column with numbers, there you see that, yeah, some, this is the missing mandatory pages, some still maybe need to do some work if they want to have everything on there. And yeah, in any case, we could just see if everything's filled properly. That's just a general check, but that's not an official review or so. And more importantly, I think those are the models now at the bottom that we added for this session. So that's awesome that we have 7 new ones, if everybody agrees. Yeah, and you see also the process stage. So all the top ones are officially published. Although, yeah, like I said, we still have to work on that review process. If, for instance, these model teams would completely add model documentation of a new version, then we would, of course, have a new process. And I think that would also be good, actually. And then there are 2 models under review, Coffee Tea and International Futures. And all the other ones are now set to in preparation. That's also the reason why you don't see them yet on the main screen, but in the links I'll show and I'll also send to you, you can see that these models are on there, but they won't show up yet in the overview page. But they will, of course, especially when they're under review. Yeah, maybe again a good moment to ask if there are any questions. You can still hear me, right? Then I think let's proceed with tour of the week.
A question by Onkar.
Okay, great.
Yes, hi. Yeah, I just wanted to know. So I am working on a different model based on times, and at some stage I would like to add it to the IMC wiki. I just wanted to know what would be the procedure for that. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, we that's definitely possible at any time. So I think that hopefully answers your question already. I mean, it would be good to make a more detailed planning also. I could think of quite a few models that we would still like to have on there, and also maybe discuss, yeah, with the individual model teams also what they would expect if they would want it anyway. And yeah, what the timeline would be. That would also be easier, I think, for the whole review process. But in principle, everything is always possible at any moment. And also when, I mean, everybody can, in principle, always retreat from the wiki if you want. You can also always change something once it isn't, if it isn't published yet. So in any case, everybody's completely free to do whatever they want. Yeah. So yeah, but let's definitely discuss afterwards if you if you plan to do that, and yeah, and when.
Sarita?
Then,
My question was related to version control. So when you say version control, when is it when you can say that you have a different version of your model?
I think if you just change from a certain model number to another number, then usually a model team also agrees on having a new model version. So then usually there are a few extra changes. But it's a good question. I think we haven't fully decided on it yet. If that is the case, in any case, we'll always archive before something is completely changed. That's also what we did right now.
Yeah, because I have this question because is it a change in the code that depicts version control, or it is a change in like your GDP and population numbers, the main indicators, that would be considered as a version control? Or maybe from different projects you are improving your model. So those are the three kinds I'm thinking. So
yeah, so I mean, maybe good also to notice that we it's also something we would like to have. So when I mentioned version control, it's also it could be an advantage of having a new or updated software, for instance, that we really see what the changes are that have been made in time on the wiki. We can see that a little bit, but I think we can improve that also. But your question was more also on when is a model new. I think a model team has to decide on it itself, and there could, for instance, also be different versions, I think, next to each other, if that's really necessary. If these are so completely different and both still actively used, I could think of that having those two versions on the wiki. But usually, I think a model team wants to describe the most recent model version, and that means usually that a slightly older version will be archived. But I think you're also
directly.
Sorry?
I think Detlef wants to respond directly, and then we can go back to Swapnil and Omkar.
Yeah, so Sarita also mentioned model inputs, and there we had the idea that there are actually two different tools. One is the YASA scenario database, and there we really would like to collect scenario assumptions and scenario output. And so if you change your GDP or population numbers, which we consider to be a scenario, we expect you to submit that to the YASA database. And the wiki here would focus on the model itself. And so the structural components. And we would like to make a link between the two. It doesn't exist yet, but you would expect, for instance, in the wiki to be that if you are looking at the description of renewable electricity, that there might be a link saying, if you want to know what the assumptions for the cost are, click here, and then you would go to the YASA database, and you would find information that has been submitted on scenarios into the YASA database. And the other way around, in the YASA database, it would be nice if you, in this session on information on renewable energy carriers, that there is a link that you could find the model descriptions. But the difference here is this is model oriented, so if you changed your model structurally, you would expect an update here, while everything related to assumptions would be something that we collect in the YASA database.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have Swapnil and Lavinia on the list.
Yes, I have a question about subsequent updation of model documentation. Like, for example, if I prepare a certain documentation, update it, it has gone through the process, and then it's on the public domain. And after that, if I want to make some more changes, and so what is the process for that? Do we have to go through this entire process of review all over again when we change something in the model documentation?
That's a good question. I think we haven't decided yet on the complete process. So it's in that sense also work in progress. But I think it relates a bit to the last point. I think if this is a new model version, then I would always choose to indeed start over again. But I mean, if that is only limited to few things, then I guess the review wouldn't be so elaborate because you could focus on these new things. That's my first thought on it. But yeah, if something in principle is published, I would say it's published, and then I would just leave it like that, and yeah, indeed start a new process. But maybe somebody else has a different idea on that. Detlef, for instance.
So our prime goal is to have an up-to-date documentation of each model. And so if you over time actually decide to update something because you have a better description of it and you have improved something small, then we should make sure that there is a process for relatively fast update of that documentation. If it becomes more substantial, you might want to contact the editorial team of the wiki and see what is the best process of updating. If it becomes really a new model version, then I would say we would like to have a full review, some kind of review again, at least of the new material. But we haven't officially decided on all the procedures yet. But we would like to make it as flexible as possible, because the main goal is to make sure that there is a place where you can find in the same way documentation on each model, which allows users to better understand our results. And if procedures become in the way of how to provide that information, that would not be helpful.
Yeah, good point. Maybe I'm also contradicting myself a little bit, because we actually ask now teams to update while some of these models are published, and I think it's still good to update those. So indeed, I think we should think about this procedure, but it's definitely good to include updates that are relevant in any case. I think then
Lavinia still has a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, again, regarding this different versions of a model, I think it's important that in the end we make sure that also older model versions will be available, because we will refer to this in our publications. So, for example, for Remind and MagPi, I will not update this wiki page now. Also, it's an older version than we are working now, but we are referring already to this wiki page in our papers, so we will need to make them available in the future. So I think we will not solve it now, but we will need a process how to deal with the different versions of the model.
Yeah, well, if it helps, in any case, we archived everything that's on there now. So all the changes that people make today, the older versions will still be there, but in PDF form. So yeah, I think there can be improvement there, definitely. But if that would help for you, I would actually recommend making the changes or changing the version, but you're free to do so, of course. And maybe if that, we could also discuss this afterwards, of course, and think of a good solution. If the solution would, for instance, be to have an extra version on the short term, to have both versions exist next to each other, that could perhaps also be an option, I think.
Certainly, if people also change their own numbering of the model, then it's relatively easy. You can easily see a Remind 5 and a Remind 6 documentation being next to each other in the wiki. If there are small changes and it would still be a Remind 5, I'm making up the numbers. I don't know whether they're accurate, but then we have to think a bit of how to deal with that. But if you change your own numbering as well, I can see easily that we can have these two versions, and then possibly make also sure that only one of those is shown first in the reference cards, for instance, because then otherwise having a whole list of different image versions or Remind versions might not be always the appropriate thing. But I agree with you that it's important to leave old versions there, because in papers people will see a reference to Remind 5, and you would like to know what Remind 5 is.
Yeah, and in principle, that you could now link that to the archive, which I'll show. But yeah, the solution should be something like that you don't have an endless list. If we would do so, if we would add more versions simultaneously, then that's something we can only do later. So unfortunately not during this session. But yeah, we could easily discuss that later, of course.
One more question coming in, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, a follow-up comment on Lavinia's point. I also think that it's really important to have easy and stable references to previous model versions, and that just having the PDF is not sufficiently user-friendly, but it should be something that you can link to. One way that how it's done with DOIs or also in software development is that there is specific versions that can be links to specific versions, but then also links to a latest version. And I think we need these two features, because when we write the message model, we want to have one link that says go to the latest version of message in this IAM documentation resource, and not have to worry there was an update there, so now we need to update our documentation to point to the latest documentation on the other side.
Yeah, great point. So hopefully that's feasible, but the DOIs, linking the DOIs is something we'll definitely think about. Okay.
I see no more hands, so please continue.
Okay. Yeah. So the rest of the presentation in principle has everything I would like to say, but I won't go through it in that sense. It's I think more fun to go through it live. What I can show the first few slides, I think. Then yeah, so I hope everybody has the web page in front of him, her, and in Chrome or Firefox, preferably, because otherwise functions aren't working. And I'll show you where to log in. If that doesn't work, if you don't have your password, then please let us know via chat or email. Then we'll hopefully solve that as soon as possible. If you email somebody, then I think easiest is Rineke or Oriana. So logging in is here, right at the right top. And principle, I think for most people that does work because we're in contact, but yeah, let us know. Then these are the pages I'll discuss. And so you also have them in this overview if you have the presentation. I added the presentation to this meeting, and the first one is the model publication and policies that we have now in place. Also the author guidelines and help function, the archive, a model comparison function, and a complete list of the model documentation pages. And then I'll go into the editing of the reference cards and model documentation pages, which you will then do afterwards. Okay, so then I'll leave the presentation here, but it's also on here. And then the first one is the model publication and policies. And so you also have these links, you don't have to write it down. We sort of have described the process flow of the publication process. That's also what I discussed earlier. And here you see which models are now either in preparation or under review. So I guess you're all on there. And but also, of course, for the other teams, you can still make changes, of course, but these are officially in preparation under review. Then the publication policies of the documentation. And lastly, the documentation tree. So which web pages would we like to have? The dark ones here are the mandatory pages, and the other ones are very nice to have. That's the model publication and policies page. Then also useful is the guidelines link. There you can find all sorts of tips of how to add text and figures and tables and everything you want on the wiki. This is mainly relevant for the model pages. For the reference cards, it still might be useful to look into this, but there it's yeah, there are preset answers and it's quite even easier to fill it in. There you probably don't need the help function. But what it explains here is that we have a visual editor, and that makes it super easy actually to make changes. So earlier it was really more programming, and now it's really what you see is what you get. So if you type something, then you also have like the normal Word functions, and you see right away what it would look like. Also useful here is, I mean, you can just go through this and try it yourself. If you, for instance, work today also on the model documentation pages. Also useful is, I said the visual editor is quite useful and it makes it easy. We also have to, that's still a bit of programming, but here we try to explain everything that you would need to know. For some features, you still need that. But if you just follow the recipe here, I think in the guidelines, and that's only for several things, for cross-referencing, for citation, a few other things, there, then you should be okay. But always feel free to ask any questions if you like. Last one is, and that's also I think good to know, citation management. That is, for instance, done with the Wiki Manager, but we also have, and it's also described here, another link where you can easily find, that's here, you can find DOIs or other kind of denotations, links to literature, and then it's quite easy to put it in the wiki. So we try to help where, where it's still a bit complicated, then this function for citation is quite easy. I think that's it for the help function. For the rest, it's self-explanatory, I think. Then the archive. Here are the archive model versions. So we archive what was there, I think, a month ago or so. And those are the models that are published. That makes sense, I think, because all the all the models that are currently under review or in preparation, don't need to be archived at the moment. And like I said, it is a PDF, and I think it's a we could definitely improve here, but in principle, I could click one image, for instance, and those are all the model pages that are on there. So in principle, all the information is there, but not in the wiki form. In any case, it might be a good idea to link, for instance, DOI to this, if possible. And you can also archive yourself if you want, and that's under a archive function. I'm not 100% sure, Lineker might know this, but if everybody can do this, but here is quite a simple recipe for making your own archive model. So you can always do that, I think, at any time. If you think, if you're not sure if you want to make changes, for instance. And also we can, of course, always turn back certain changes that you've made. So don't be afraid to change something.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Matthijs, I see all those archive pages, and I think it would be nice to have it numbered with a version number. So if you make an archive, you can you enter the archive name, and then it would be a good thing to add the version number. So that's something in this version management to improve already.
Yeah. So having the current version number already clearly, in the
title.
in the title, and also when you make the PDF, you see it right at the top. I think that's also a good point. Yeah. All right. I'll write it down. Then next interesting feature, I think, is the model comparison, and it's yeah, as you saw, people think that's quite a relevant feature also to have on the wiki. It's here, overviews, model comparison, and there you can just click on a few models, and then look, for instance, at one of the different features or yeah, certain model attributes. And here you see, and it's based on the reference card, so here you can just see which model has it and which doesn't in its reference card. What we also would like to do is to have maybe here also a better search function or filter that you would like to look at a certain criteria or certain variable and then see which model has it. So it's a bit sort of turned around. So now you would have to click on all the models to see if they have it. But in principle, this can be found. Yeah, I have no more things I think to discuss here. Then completeness check, and that's also useful if you start working on the model documentation pages. That's, for instance, the table I showed earlier that was based on actually this. So if you, again, take one of the models, maybe image, then here you can see which pages are there or which pages are not fully filled. And that distinction is made. So again, here you see these mandatory pages that are in bold and the optional pages in not bold. And then there's also a distinction made between almost with filled pages, or at least they have more than one paragraph, and with pages that only have one paragraph. There you could think of having more information. The red ones here are pages that haven't been included. So some models might not have capital or labor markets, like image, for instance. That's also maybe good to know if also after this session, but in general, if model pages aren't filled because this information isn't there, or model team thinks it's not worth providing or something like that, then we close these pages, which is in principle fine. In some cases, you can also explain well that it shouldn't be in the model. Yeah, and of course, pages that are empty, image doesn't have those. It's either not there or filled properly. But yeah, you can also see if there's only one sentence maximum, then yeah, you can consider it empty. So that's the completeness check. You can just do it by model. That's actually some useful pages I wanted to show. Now I would like to go to the reference cards and how to edit those. So again, that might be a good moment for if people have questions.
I don't see any hands, but there were some questions on the chat regarding logging in. And I think most of them have been answered on the chat, but maybe good to know centrally. So you should have received login details by email already. If not, we can still register you and then either send the chat directly to Oriana and Rindeke or just email them and then they will set it up for you.
Perfect. Yeah. I just thought of something that is also relates to model comparison. So maybe that's also good to show before we move on. So here on the top, you see all the model documentation links. So here are the models that have model documentation, the published models. And below that, you have the reference cards. And if you go to the model documentation pages, there you see again the structure that you saw in that larger tree, and there you can also click on certain topics and then see what it looks like, for instance, in different models. So here you have, let's go for instance to land use. This is the description and image. And maybe also message globe IAM also has some information on that. So that's more like comparing the documentation part, not the reference cards that I just showed, but also just specifically the longer text. Yeah, that's maybe good to know. Then going back to the reference cards. Again, these links you already have in the presentation. It's a link to the meeting, but it is in any case here on the author tools. There you can add input to the reference card, but also to the model documentation if you're interested. And yeah, I'll just again use image, but it's the same for every model. This is the screen that you then get. This is the filled-in reference card with all the boxes checked where relevant. And for every, I mean, this is for instance something that doesn't work well in Internet Explorer, but you should have a button above every block. So there should be edit about or edit model scope and methods. And first starting with edit about, there it's one thing is good to, well, two things are good to mention. It's maybe in any case good to mention, please use the include the model version. So it's definitely, that's something that's crucial. The second thing here is participation, and now we added full, so image is a model that's also includes the model documentation, but you could also change this to reference card only. And what I did for as preparation for this session was change everything to full, but I can imagine that some models just want to add the reference card, which is fine in principle. Then you should change this to reference card only. But you could also, if you're not sure yet, you could leave it to full and maybe let us know what you want to do with it. But if you, if you don't want to do it, then it's good that we just either change this to reference card only or close pages that you don't want to fill. And here the process stage is something that I guess we can only change. But if you can change it, then don't change it, because this changing this makes that the model would go to this. There would be all sorts of processes that are related to published models. So if you're new now to the wiki, then it should be in preparation. That's good to know. And lastly, here is that the link to the so you have the institution abbreviation institution, and then it would make sense maybe to have the link to the institution, but preferably we would like to have the link to the model documentation, because that's so the native model documentation site. That link we should definitely have somewhere here on the wiki on the reference card, and I think this would be the place to do it. You might want to change this text here. So if you have that, then definitely put the link there. So that's the about section. Yeah, and all the other ones are, I hope, pretty straightforward. Let's open one, for instance. So if you look at macroeconomic, and all of these blocks look a bit like this. So you have all sorts of boxes that you can tick, and like we also explained, please do this based on the model and the meta model data that you have. Ideally, the AR6 registration form or a recent project registration form. There, everything should be in there. And hopefully the naming is the same. There might be a few tiny changes, but I think those are easy to find, like what type of model do we have, for instance, those kind of things. But apart from that, everything should be in there. And what you can do is just really check these boxes if that applies to your model. But you can also add something yourself if you think that you can trade something else that's very relevant. Then you can also put it in here and even add a comment to that. So in that sense, it's yeah, I think super easy to change. Yeah, and that's the case for all of these blocks. So there is model scope and methods, so sort of general information about the model, and also type of region, geographical and temporal scope. Then there's socio-economic drivers, macroeconomy. Then there's energy and land use, and finally, yeah, there's one block of emissions, climate, and impacts. So those are the reference cars. And yeah, there's, compared to the registration forms, they're quite exhaustive. So I think we have everything in there. But even if you have comments, of course, then please let us know. I think that is it about the filling in reference cards. Super easy. But like I said, if you want to go beyond that and also want to add something to the detailed model documentation, then you could click on a few links here. For instance, go to the top link. This is the model documentation page for image, but you could also click on, if you want to say something about model scope and methods, on that link, and then you're also there. So there are all sorts of ways to go to the model documentation pages. What might be good to explain there, we saw that actually earlier, and I'll try a model now that we just added. It was a bit unclear where you should click if you're in one of these pages. So let's, for instance, try the EPA model. I was in contact with them, and there go to the model documentation pages. Oh, they already filled something in, so I think that went quite well now. Maybe something that's empty. Yeah. Here, if you want to edit something here, then there's no edit button, but you have to look at the edit button at the top. And now we're in the edit mode. Here, this was a bit difficult to find. So here you have an insert paragraph at the first or third line. So there you can just start typing. And if you're done, then you can save your changes, of course. So yeah, I think that was the only thing that was difficult here. Obviously, if you want to add a bit more advanced things like the tables and citations and all sorts of things that might be a bit more difficult than just adding text, then that's in the author guidelines. And again, here, feel free to ask us questions about it. Yeah, we can definitely look into that in detail, for instance, in a breakout group. That's what I had here. So yeah, any questions?
I don't see any hands popping up yet.
I think there was maybe one suggestion of Sylvia. If she wants to add to that. Maybe not. And there are several questions again on the logins, but we'll get back to you privately on that.
Yeah.
Okay, what we could do, for instance, yeah, so let's just give it a go and see what happens. I think everybody can at any point, I think I will do that, grab a coffee or have a slight break. But yeah, so you could sort of come back at 5 minutes. Maybe people have a few questions then. I will always listen, so I'll just keep the sound on here. Is that a good idea?
Sounds good. I think Sylvia still has her hand up now, maybe before we go into the break?
Yeah, if possible. I just wanted to present myself. I'm part of the YAML Secretariat, so I'm not a modeler, but I'm taking part in this workshop because we are finalizing a new website for the YAMC, and an institutional website, which will also have a part devoted to the resources of the YAMC members. And what we want to do is to implement a page listing the models that have been developed within the consortium. And we will, of course, refer to the YAMC wiki page by picking the most relevant information and redirecting to the YAMC wiki page. So I just wanted to inform you of this new feature that will be implemented in the new website. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a very good point. So I think we are and will definitely be in close collaboration also with the IMC, and it would be great to think of the best way to. That's also your plan to link the IMC website and also the IMC activities to our website if you want to have model documentation. Also to coordinate that a bit. There might be some more information you mentioned also to have on the IMC website. Yeah, and if we, for instance, add new models to the website, and that we could, for instance, think of having the kind of information that you want submitted at the same time or so. It's in any case good to think about that, I think.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Matthijs.
Specifically on this point, I think that because there are models in the IMC that will not be part of the wiki, and so there will be more models on the IMC website listed. But it might be good even if we can think of a way that the IMC website can maybe even pick up information that is in the, for instance, in the reference pages, reference cards, automatically, so that people don't have to submit twice. I don't know whether that's possible, but.
Yeah, in principle, it should be easy to do, I guess, right? So they all have the same format and the same URL, so I guess you could link these pages quite easily if you want to look at specific data. Yeah, so maybe I wasn't quite clear, but my proposal would be, I think people are doing that just to get started with filling in the reference cards for everybody who wants to do so. And at the same time, for a few people, including myself, to have a very short break, and then we'll, if there are new answers of new questions after 5 to 10 minutes or so, then we'll do our best to answer them. So let me know if that's not a good idea, but that would be my proposal.
So you might want to check whether people are already checking in, looking in.
Is that something I can see, or Rieneke maybe?
No, but with this group, you can also do it by voice. So people are indeed now trying to log in into the system.
Yeah, this is Sergey. I'm actually editing reference model documentation. So perfect. Thank you. Very good instruction, Matthijs. Very helpful. Very good.
Thanks. You're welcome.
Hi, Mathis. I have a question about the timeline. So, when do you expect the edits to be finished? Is there any deadline for filling up the model documentation pages?
That's a very good question. We do have a few reviews going on, and that has taken too much time, I would say. I think we would sort of when you're actually done with your submission, then I think we should also discuss that a bit. We should sort of make haste in finding people, editors and reviewers, and agree on a sort of final date there. But you're right. It's good to agree on that and to do that as fast as possible, because in principle, I think that should be quite doable for like 30-something pages.
Can I add something?
Yeah, of course.
Because I think Sergei's question is also not only on our side, but on the when do we expect models to finish submitting? And the most urgent deadline is the IPCC report, and that concerns mostly the reference cards. And so I missed a bit of your presentation early on, Matthijs, but did you discuss the appendix in the IPCC report?
No, actually didn't. So that's a good point. In principle, and that's something that's not yet in the presentation, but we can easily generate Word files from the reference cards, and that's something that has been used in the first version of the AR6 appendix, and I assume that will definitely also be used for the final version. So it's quite easy for us to generate all this standard information in text form. Yeah, and obviously what we have here under reference cards is also very closely related, if not the same, to the AR6 registrations. So it's quite useful for them. And the deadline is still in September for that?
Yeah, so for the IPCC this time, there will be again a methodology appendix, and this time it's quite clear that for the models that the model output that we discuss, we need also a description of the model in that appendix, and that will be similar to the reference card, so simply an indication of the main characteristics of the models. And the last time in filling up that model, we used the reference cards. We will make teams aware that we transfer information, no problem. But we could really support the IPCC by using the reference cards for that. And so that's the first deadline we have. And officially that's certainly September. It needs to be submitted again for the second order draft, but the earlier the better there, because people have to start writing that appendix. And so I would say reference cards ready by July would be really a great moment, and because it's relatively little work, that can be, it could even be more or less today, I guess, for most. Then for the rest of the documentation, that's flexible. So in principle, whenever teams would like to submit, and then Matthijs was answering it from the side of the IMC, the management of the website. Yes, there we need to make sure that we make our procedures a bit more professional. What's in there at the moment is mostly coming out of the advanced project. And in the advanced project, we had a team that was really working on this. We have tried to already set up a team again of editors similar to a journal, which would manage this and would review and make sure that we have a quick review of the pages and then publication. One other thing that we are working on is to see whether we can attach a journal actually to the, not to the reference card, but the full version, and make sure that there's an official journal publication out of the documentation that teams put in. so you can also refer to a journal name, and there's a publisher very interested in seeing whether he could work with us and make an official journal out of this documentation website.
That's been discussed, and even if that would not be the case, but it sounded quite promising, then it's in any case the plan to add DOIs to all the pages. Yeah, so making it referenceable on a short notice, that's definitely a goal also.
Yep, thank you. That's very useful. So, well, reference card actually is very easy. I think I've just filled the whole page of the reference. So I guess there is some process where you can tell us if that's up to the standards or not.
Yeah, that's also what I thought when you mentioned it. We could definitely promise, I think, to look at all the reference card pages in the next few weeks. See if something looks odd, missing, or yeah, incomplete in any way, or incorrect, and then we'll share our feedback. So it might definitely be good to have a sort of fast track procedure there, also with AR6 in mind. And in any case, it might be good to look at it before the Navigate meeting, just to have a sort of short, rough overview of what is in there. I think we can do that. And that's the end of May for people outside of Navigate. So 2 weeks. Well, in any case, look at it this week, sort of, yeah, the first sort of going through the pages and have a first look. Yeah.
Hi, this is Ramiro speaking. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What are the steps to include a model that is new to the wiki? We would like to document our model. So.
Yeah, that's something we need to do, and it takes a bit of time. I think if we agree that the model should be in there, then we can try to do that in a bit. But which model would that be?
It would be ICES. It's a CG model developed at CMCC.
Okay. Perhaps it's easiest if you just send an email, I think, and then to me, for instance, and then I'll have a look. I'll see if I can do it before the end of the session, but we'll discuss that then in the short notice anyway.
Okay, thank you.
And another point, I think a few people asked about the presentation. In principle, it's attached to the meeting, but I'll also send it to everybody via email, so that's I think easier. Then you have it close at hand.
Sarita, do you have a question?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask, so if we are entering the reference card and we have questions, like detailed questions, like when you say exogenous, endogenous, depending on how the model is, there sometimes the variable can be exogenous or endogenous. So how do we, and it can be both sometimes depending on the scenario. So how do we basically know when you say exogenous, what does it mean? Endogenous, so how those kind of things. So it's model related particular questions. Do we basically do it offline, like through emails, or?
Yeah, that's an option. We could also try breakout.
Yeah, I can make a breakout room with you and.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Then, and I was also thinking. So I assume you don't have a registration form for any projects or for the AR6, for instance.
When you say registration form, no, we already do, because under CD links and Engage, we did fill in a registration form. So
okay, so that should in principle include most of those things. So I think the same categorization should be there. But I mean that if you're still unsure about it, then still good to think about it. But that might help. So maybe you've already thought about it.
Yeah.
But let's go to breakout. It's nice to try that, I think.
Okay.
You, Matthias, with you or someone else better?
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. That's fine.
I'll just put you and Sarita in a breakout room.
Yeah.